I need to. All right, I'll just talk a little bit more and we'll go right to questions, because maybe you have questions. Maybe answer them all. All right, I'll just tell you something, like, tells you you're untrustworthy. It's hard to make decisions when you're anxious, right? Because you're like, I don't know what's the right one. I was talking to somebody about that today. One of my clients today was it's like so hard to make a decision because what's the right decision? There isn't a right decision. You make a decision and you just make that one the right decision, right? Tries to confuse you. This doesn't happen to any of you, I bet. Anxiety tries to confuse you, right? It pretends it's you, it comes in this way. If you like say, oh no, I'm not worried about that, then it changes to something else. It kind of has you upside down. You don't know which way's up. You don't know if you're protecting yourself or you're suffering. I mean, it does that on purpose because it just wants you to feel vulnerable. And if you feel vulnerable, it has power. It does all this to get power over you. And so if you knew that it was a trick, you can undermine this power. That's why I talk about it this way. Uses black and white thinking. So anxiety uses black and white thinking. You have to say it's either good or bad. Remember that dualness? It's either good or bad. And if you think it's either good or bad, then you're like really scared to do anything because what if you get it wrong? Right? So someone's like angry, they don't love you anymore because they're angry now. It's like black and white, right? And anxiety wants you to think black and white because it wants you to be so afraid of failing that you'll stay anxious. Does that make sense? It's a horrible trick. Tells you you're untrustworthy. I said that. It tries to confuse you. It says this is real or this is important. This is real. It's like this is really something to be scared of. Like that other stuff didn't mean anything, but this semester the professors are hard. That was one of my clients. But this every single time you're anxious about something, it's like this is important. That's the ego voice. It wants your attention. All day long it's going to be like, listen to me, this is important. And so it's going to use content that you think is really important. This is important. I don't want anything to happen to your kids. Yeah, but it's just using anything. It tries to get you vulnerable. It judges you. We talked about judges you. It says there's no point. Like you don't find a point to doing something because you think you're just going to fail it, or it's going to be too hard, or it's going to be uncomfortable. So you end up not wanting to do anything because you don't want to do it with anxiety. It doesn't sound like fun. Like doing something socially, a lot of people are like, well, if I go to that party, I'll just be uncomfortable there. So you're like, I don't want to go to the party. Is it a really not want to go to your party or that party, or you just don't want to go and have anxiety there? If you knew you wouldn't get anxious, would you want to go? And a lot of times the answer changes, but it's so much easier to say, I don't really want to. It feels a lot better than like the anxiety's not letting you. All right, I think I'm through a lot of this. Tells you can't handle it. We talked about that. Anxiety, this is really one of the biggest triggers. If you think you can't handle it. Right, so anxiety has to, you need to think that you can't handle it, or anxiety won't have any power. You need to be scared. Right? It doesn't want you to talk about it. Anxiety in your head is much more powerful. There's this quote by Mark Levy. It says, your mind is a terrible place to go alone. When you're in isolation, you're separate. It's always about being separate. When you're in isolation, you're separate. And if you're separate, the anxiety has a lot of power because you don't have anyone else helping you or challenging that. You don't feel connected. So it doesn't want you to talk about it. Because if you talk about it, your friend, first of all, if you say it out loud, sometimes it sounds so ridiculous, it takes the power away from it right away. Does anyone have that happen? Do you ever talk about your fears and just by saying it out loud, you relieve yourself a little? So it does not want you to talk about it. It does not. It wants you to stay in your head, alone, and afraid. Okay, I got one. Awesome. So, all right. I know there's so much more I can say. There's so much more I was going to say and I didn't, but I think I'd love to hear if anybody has any questions at all.
I have a microphone, and I'd like you to speak into the microphone so that we can all hear I bet you can.
Yeah.
Does it, is it, did I turn it on?
Is the light on?
The light's on. 1, 2. Maybe it has to warm up.
Yeah, I can repeat
Is
it
the
the
lights
first
on?
time.
It says mute, RF mute.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's all good.
It's live? It's live. So please,
Oh,
Jodi is a fount of information. So raise your hand and I'll come to you with a mic.
we have one right here. Yeah, the blue.
You didn't mention anything at all about depression, how anxiety can perhaps lead to depression. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, lots of thoughts. Thank you. Awesome. So the question was how it is like anxiety and depression, you know, how are they related? How does one bring the other on? And like I was saying, that original thing of loss, you know, when you have that loss and then you have all this judgment and then all this worry, that's what I think of a depression is. Like you have all of this emotion and it's heavy and it's dark and you feel hopeless and helpless, right? So these are what you feel when you're depressed. You're sad, so sad that you have this feeling and you're judging yourself like crazy and you're worried that this is going to last a really long time. And so so it's very easy to get depressed, isn't it? And so we have this. Is this appropriate feeling, but we don't allow ourselves to have it? I was going to talk about that more tonight, but I could talk forever. So you have this feeling, and then you have all this worry, all this self-judgment, like, I can't believe I get angry, I can't handle this, and why does this always happen to me? And you're like, you hate yourself, and it just gets bigger and bigger, and that's depression, this heavy, dark, hopeless and helpless and incredibly sad that you have to deal with it. And self-hatred or depreciation, it's not to that extent. And then it's so heavy, add in some physical pain, and you're anxious and depressed, and it's really, really hard, no motivation, you have a lot of guilt, and you're stuck, right? And when you're stuck, it's hard to get rid of your anxiety, and then you just get more depressed too. And when you're stuck, you're isolated, so you're in your head a lot, and the more you're in your head, the worse it gets, right? The more judgment and the more anxiety. Does that help? Is that right? Is that okay?
I just wondered, is it heredity? And somebody once said something to me about some things that could be missing in the system, like maybe you need a supplement the way you were born that creates more anxiety. Is that true? And also just another thing too, does natural supplements or acupuncture anything work for it?
I think anything could work. Like you could. There's a lot of tools. There's like I don't know. I can't even say a number, but there's so many different tools that you could use to help your anxiety and depression. And yes, I would encourage everybody to look at your diet. You know, the more whole foods you have, the more fermented foods to get that gut bacteria going, that could really affect your pain, your inflammation, your depression, and your anxiety. If you work on good gut bacteria, that's like a whole other talk, right? Some people say vitamin D or magnesium. You know, if you're low on something, if you're low on vitamin D, sometimes if you're low iron, all of these things definitely can contribute. If you eat a lot of processed food, all of these things definitely contribute to your overall health. And yes, anxiety and depression, absolutely. And so when you are more compassionate with yourself and you're kinder with yourself, then you eat better because you want to take care of yourself. If you hate yourself, you don't care what you put in your body, right? And so you're not going to eat the good, when I say fermented food or like it's, like yogurt, like the acidophilus in the yogurt, like that good gut bacteria. I mean, there's a lot of different foods that you can eat for that. So, so hereditary, she asked if it was hereditary, and I mean, what I see is it's learned, right? So if you have a parent who's anxious, yes, you learn how to be anxious. So anxiety is a learned experience. Plus, if your parents are anxious, you're stressed. You're very stressed a lot. And so if you have that chronic high adrenaline, it's all fixable, don't worry. It's all fixable. That's the good thing. But, so did they figure out a gene that might be really, yeah, but I don't really know what that means necessarily. But it definitely, you see it in families because we learn to be afraid of things. We have to learn that. Before I was 5, I had to learn that death was bad. I mean, it's so in our culture, so we learn it immediately. There's no blame on your parents at all. I mean, there's fear in all of everywhere, right? We're taught it in all the TV shows, we're taught it in all the commercials, we're taught to look at our deficits, we're taught to look at what's out of control, that sensationalism. So it's definitely not like a parent blaming thing. Yes.
How about antidepressants in counseling?
Yeah, well, counseling, I mean, hey, that's what I do. It's so good. Woo! Counseling! Well, they're going to break down. Now all counselors are equal, right? So some of them, there's different modalities. And so my modality is narrative therapy, so I break down the problem, separate it from you, and that's why it's so powerful and it works really fast. And then we find skills that you already have. Like cognitive behavioral will teach you skills. Narrative therapy, you are all skilled. You did not make it to this age and not have skills in your life. You're survivors already. Because the bad things happen in your life already, I'm sure, right? And you've survived them. But when you're anxious, you have no access to those skills. Like you have no trust in them, you don't remember them, like they're gone. You've responded already. And so in narrative therapy, we bring out the ones you already have, and you have a relationship with them, and it's so much more powerful than cognitive behavioral.
But there's a lot of people that do both. Use the antidepressants.
Yeah, so people use it, so a lot of people use SSRIs or antidepressants to help with their depression and anxiety. I'm not a medical doctor. And there's different response to those, like it's just one of the tools. And some people are helped a lot, and some people don't see a response. And then some people have a negative response. Not many, but, yeah. And I know there's some more, that's great. Okay, then.
And give it to this one.
Life, all of us have stresses and there's bad things that go on, and we're all faced with it. And a lot of our anxieties don't come we all face trouble.
Yes.
That's normal, because that's where the world is.
We can't hear you.
And so anyway, sometimes a person will become depressed, but they've never experienced anything like that before. And the reason, so they don't know what's happening to them. And time will go by, and they'll be in such a state of depression that they can't get up. And that's when they need something to increase their sense of well-being. And it usually comes in the form of an antidepressant. It takes a long time for the antidepressants to work, but once they get in the system, your sense of well-being will come back. And that's happened in my life with some of my relatives, and I know how it works. I'm a nurse, and I've seen it. So, you can be a perfectly normal individual, and the stresses of life, a death in the family, losing a job, one of those things will cause somebody to go into depression. And if you've never been depressed before, you don't understand it.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
That's
Definitely.
true.
That's what, you don't, right. That's why I don't talk about it as a mental illness. This is a response to life. And sometimes we get caught. It's so easy. There's nothing wrong with you.
Well, I might not be understanding about,
I might not be understanding.
about dismissing anxiety.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't understand how you can dismiss every wave that comes in and not deal with it. And then I always thought anxiety allowed you to solve the problem as opposed to someone dismissing it. And that's how I'm interpreting it. I have science.
That's okay. So she's saying, she interprets, and everybody interprets these words differently. This is just how I'm using anxiety. Like, I define anxiety as the leftover fear response when you're not in physical danger. And what's your name?
Pardon me?
What's your name? Carol. And Carol was talking about how she thought about anxiety as like helpful because when she's anxious, she uses that energy to solve problems. Yes. The fear response, like we get our awareness, like we get attention, and we know we have to solve a problem. And if we started to take action and used our agency to take action and solve that problem, it would go away. And so yes, so guilt is the same way. Guilt has a purpose, like fear has a purpose to take action. Guilt has a purpose where we feel guilt so that we could be aware. It calls our attention so we can look at the situation and say, how do I want to respond to this? Do I want to restore the relationship? Do I want to say I'm sorry? Do I want to make a commitment not to do that again? Right? Once you decide what to do, you take that action, and it might just be thinking different, it doesn't have to be a physical action, then the guilt is pointless. So yeah, fear calls our attention to a situation and we can act. So you could think about these words, so I would use that, I might use a different word just because it's the way I define it. But I'm not saying this is how I want everyone to define it and we should define anxiety. Some people say anxiety is good, it makes me wear my seatbelt. I call that common sense. But you know, so yes, blessings, that's awesome that anxiety helps you solve problems because it gives you the energy, it makes you determined, or it makes you desperate enough so you gotta figure it out. And great.
If you go forward and do that, and if not,
Yeah, if you get stuck, then you're stuck. When you get stuck, your anxiety goes up. If you stay immobilized in the guilt, if you stay immobilized, what happens is guilt comes for us to take action. What happens is we feel guilt and we get stuck. And we keep the guilt but we don't take action. And we suffer. That's what happens to everybody.
Can you talk about some like coping, because that's what I do, is like I get anxious and then I just don't get into action, although like I know I've had like so many like successes in the past, but like just like right now there's like 5 different major life stressors, but then like now I feel like I'm paralyzed even though I know that like that I've had ways to
And even movement is taking action. Like, you know how people pace when you're anxious, you pace? That's moving. Rock, take walks. I mean, if you need to start somewhere and you're like, what do I do? I'm immobilized. Go take a walk. I mean, it's beautiful out. At least take a walk because the movement will be taking action. It will change the chemicals in your brain and you'll be able to plant and start to problem solve. Right now you're immobilized, it's overwhelmed, you're in the chaos and you can't even problem solve. So if you move your body, clean the house, organize a drawer, clean out a closet, plan a party, design clothes, really anything like that. If you do something like that, your brain chemistry will switch. It'll switch off. The amygdala will switch off. Then you'll have the clarity to do what you need to do for the problem. Problem solving or being creative uses the part of the brain that creates that anxiety. So if you are doing like organizing, planning a party, making something creative, learning something new, those are all like problem solving things. And you're going to build up the part of your brain you need to build up to ward anxiety off in the future. So you're going to take action. Okay, yeah.
I want to be the last one tonight. And I just want to let you know, I just got a comment to make. You know, it's not any question. But as far as one paragraph I read out of a book recently was just saying that as you're talking about bad things, bad news.
Yeah.
There's not a person in here that doesn't know what bad news is. There's a lot of evil in the world, pain, suffering, jealousy, anger, bad news, and more bad news. Divorce, etc., broken friendships, broken relationships, etc. Who doesn't know what bad news is? But the whole bottom line is, and then somebody feels somehow, bad news doesn't do anything. It's totally useless. There's no, it's nothing. Bad news won't help us one bit. So the book that I was reading says that you have to concentrate not on bad news. Don't look at anything that's bad. Don't put your energy, time, thought to it. But instead, focus on good news. And the only good news that the book said, it doesn't come from me. One that said, as you said earlier, trust in the Lord, and then offer praise and thanksgiving. If you do those three things, it's a simple path. Trust, praise, and thanksgiving.
You see how the praise and thanksgiving, they're actions.
Yeah, hey, I just
We're not passively praying, we're actively praying.
I
Yeah.
like to say it like a little child trusts his mother. You can understand it. Then the little child says to the mother, this is the last thing I'll say, I'm not trying to preach to anybody. Little child says to the mother, hey mom, you're great. I love you. Thanks for everything you do, like on Mother's Day. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, so we are in culture to look at the bad. And so, and it is there, and it's there, and so we don't want to ignore it, we don't want to pretend it's not happening, because we want to love those people who are suffering, and send them prayers, send them money, send them, gifts, whatever we can do to the suffering people in the world, taking action. You sit helplessly from your couch and watch the news, you will get overwhelmed and anxious. If you say, I'm going to do something for my fellow man, and it doesn't necessarily mean, if you see a disaster way far away, you could do something right in Rochester for other people that are suffering. That's okay. Do something. You will not be anxious anymore if you do something you're getting out of your head, you're taking action, you're making the world a better place. Now you're focusing on that good and that positive.
We have one more. Our last question.
Okay.
What are some physical symptoms of anxiety?
Oh my God, that's bad, right? Increased heart rate, maybe increased breathing, maybe difficulty breathing. You want to answer it?
No. I have a whole list of things, and they've all been covered except one.
Okay, we can come talk to me after. So physical symptoms are, you might get hot, you might get cold, you just have a lot of energy in your body, you might get a headache, stomach ache. I mean, the anxiety symptoms are so varied. You might feel empty, you might have your mind racing. There's just a lot of different symptoms, and people find them all different. And if they're weird, then you get scared that it's weird. Like, my leg's shaking. Anything, anxiety can really.
Jodi, thank you so much.
I do have some books here for anybody who wants. You can come up if you want a book, or I do have I forget. I do have meditation classes in Irondequoit if you want to give me your email, or if you want to just be on my mailing list, come on up.
And I do recommend the book. It's a delightful read. Very, very good ideas for coming in.